Welcome back. Cindy Dole here, a special broadcast of Home Wizards. We're live at the Post Parade. And what is the Post Parade? Well, this is really where you get to see all of the work that has been done over the past year up close, in person, so much better than what you might even see on TV or even see at the parade in person, because now you are virtually, you can almost touch the floats. And this is when you get to see all the colors. And a lot of people who are walking around today go, did they paint that float? Well, the answer is no. I mean, they might be able, they paint the base of the float to cover it, but not a speck of this float. Any float can have anything artificial showing. It has to all be natural materials. In fact, one thing you can't have on a float is rocks, because rocks don't grow. Hello. And so they have on one of these floats, the city of Duarte, in fact, I was showing folks how you could poke one of the little vials of roses into the rock. That's because they're styrofoam rocks covered with pepper and different seeds and so forth. But here to talk about one of the stunning floats, it's the Camelot float that every year the Bay Advance folks, my friends that really are the keys to making your garden simple and successful, they always debut a couple of great roses that have been tested and promise to be great ones. And with me is Lance Walheim, who knows all about it. He works closely with Bay Advanced, and he's written all kinds of books like Roses for Dummies. So thanks for being here, Lance.
My pleasure. Good morning.
So the Camelot, Happy New Year. And so with me is the rose that everyone's talking about. This is the Dick Clark bandstand.
Right.
A rose, and it really is stunning. And so describe it for people who haven't seen it yet in person or on TV.
Well, it's a grandiflora, and they're really, all America rose selections. These are the best new roses of the year. These have been tested across the United States for quality of bloom, for disease resistance, all these great things, and it's one of the very best roses of the new year. It's a grandiflora. It's a creamy white that has a cherry red wash on it. The one that we're looking at here, even in Southern California, we need a little help to get our roses to bloom in the middle of winter. So these have been helped along in a greenhouse for a couple of months, and people don't realize sometimes that how much weather can have an effect on a rose and the color, the temperatures, and also the length of the night and the day. And when they grow this in a greenhouse, the whites come out more than the reds do. When you actually get this out in the garden, you'll see that it has a much more pronounced cherry red flush over the top of it. And, anybody that grows some of the really favorite roses like Double Delight or like Peace, the bicolored roses, knows that they look a little bit different in springtime than they will in the heat of the summer. So this is affected by the weather just as well. And as a matter of fact, probably more than another rose, because as this rose opens, the cherry red color turns to a darker burgundy. So what you end up with is a bush that has roses that no two roses look exactly the same. So, it's a wonderful cut flower. It's got a nice little fragrance.
It's stunning.
Yeah, it's a pretty rose.
And explain to people how celebrities become tied to a rose.
Well, obviously with Dick Clark, it's a perfect rose for New Year's, and that's certainly perfect for us. But how people choose the name of a rose, the hybridizer choose it. This rose came from Dick Clark came from Weeks Roses, which is a local Southern California nursery.
Oh, good.
And they hybridized it, and so then they take a look and they say, well, what's going to help sell this rose? We got a great rose, but what we can do to help sell it? And so they'll put a celebrity
Those
name.
marketing people.
Yeah, they do. And it's very important because it can make or break a rose. You get the right name for a rose, and it can sell a lot. And it's different with each person. Some people may be very actively involved in choosing roses, like Barbra Streisand, who had a rose named after her a couple years ago, was very active.
Well, second-hand rose,
right? There you go.
Right?
It has a great nose. I didn't say that.
Oh, come on now.
I'll hear from Babs. So anyway, it's very important what they call the roses, and with these days, the most important thing about roses, they be easy to care for, good disease resistance, and a lot of bloom. These are the roses these years are just really becoming landscape workhorses. And the other All-America Rose selection we had this year was Walking on Sunshine, which is a yellow floribunda.
And that was on the Bay Advance float as well?
That one was not on the float
as
well. No, just we focused on this one. So it's a yellow floribunda, great landscape rose, and great color. So.
Well, as I'm trying to smell the fragrance, I'm not smelling much.
Yeah, this was
for the Dick
cut,
Clark.
This was cut a while back.
But it does have a fragrance.
Yeah, it does.
It does.
When it's grown in your garden, it has a nice light
kind of
fragrance.
A sweet?
It's kind of a how would you call it? I would describe it as it's a light. It's kind of a fleeting fragrance. I
Oh,
mean, it's
okay.
not like going into Mr. Lincoln where you're just going to be totally knocked out, but it has a very pleasant fragrance, and so does the Walking on Sunshine as
Oh,
well. So.
nice. Because that's always a bonus. You always wonder why many roses don't really have a fragrance.
Well, it has to do with what the breeders or the hybridizers were looking for when the roses. It used to be years ago is that everybody was looking for these long-stemmed hybrid tea roses with the beautiful form and the flower. And they weren't looking as much for the fragrance or the landscape appeal. But, as gardeners, we've changed. We want more fragrance. We want landscape shrubs that are really going to look good in the garden and so that are easy to care for. So the hybridizers have changed, too. And now fragrance is coming back. I don't think you'll find many roses at all that come out now that don't,
Yeah.
don't have a little bit of fragrance.
We're
It's
kind of
important.
demanding, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
We want it all.
Yeah. Well, they know what's going to sell.
Yeah. Well, and these, by the way, are for sale. You can find them at your local garden center
betcha.
in the bare root form, right?
That's right.
They won't have the blooms on them.
No, that's right.
But when you look at the floats in person, when you come down to the post parade, or if you don't get to come this time, hopefully you come next time. It's so fun to see how they assemble these floats and how when there's a large bloom, every rose or orchid or large flower is in a vial
Right.
with some water and some food of some kind. On your float, the Bear Advanced float, do you know what kind of food? Was it a floral, typical food you get when you get some cut flowers?
Yeah,
or was it
basic-
7-Up? Or something
well,
like
yeah,
that?
they've done a lot of research over the
Yeah.
years. What's going to make the cut flowers last so long?
Yeah.
But you basically find out what they really want is they want something that's going to keep any kind of fungus or bacteria
Yeah,
from growing
like
in
bleach,
the water.
maybe?
Yeah, something like
Aspirin?
that. And then a little bit. There you go. And then also a little bit of sugar, so that
A
they can
little
have some
sugar.
carbohydrates. So
Little
to keep it going.
food, a little fluid, and a little antibacteria
Yeah,
fungus,
that's
and you
why
got it.
that's why we say when you're cutting flowers, keep the water clean. It doesn't hurt to put a couple drops of bleach in and
Yeah.
put something like a 7-Up or something that's
Right.
going to give it some sugar so that it'll keep blooming and it keep healthy.
And the same thing works for our Christmas trees, right?
That's
you
right.
know, you put a little bit of water, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of antifungal, and
Yeah, with the Christmas trees, they absorb that water so quickly. The most important thing is just make sure you're keeping them filled.
yeah.
Because and they're not as sensitive to some of the fungal things as a tender stem of a rose would. So I wouldn't be as concerned much about that as I would just making sure that I had the water in the.
Now
in
here at the
trough.
Post Parade, a lot of the folks have been asking, looking at the floats, where do all these flowers come from? And I was surprised to hear that while we in California are really one of the biggest capitals of flowers of all kinds, it's very expensive to get the flowers from here on the floats because of the property values, I've been told. And so a lot of the floral designers will say that it's just a matter of economics that they'll go to places like South America or South Africa
Right.
or even Holland
Right.
and have these flowers imported. Is that the case on the many
Yeah,
floats you've
it
seen?
certainly
Yeah?
is. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's just the way of the world now. They can get these things
Yeah.
done cheaper overseas,
Yeah.
and that's where the roses come from. And one of the things that we were talking about, these greenhouse roses, most of them are grown in greenhouses. They're hybridized so that they perform well and give you that crisp, clear color in the greenhouse. And most of those roses wouldn't do very well if you were to put them outside in your garden. They wouldn't bloom as much. The colors wouldn't be the same, and they'd probably have some disease problems. So, that's why at Bear Advance we love to get the garden roses and the All-America Rose selections on the float so we can really show people some roses, exciting new roses
Yep.
that they can grow in their own garden.
We can do this.
We can.
Exactly, as opposed to feeling like we're failures. We don't want that. We want to feel like we're successful gardeners.
That's what it's all about.
And it's fun because, you even hear the people that are the most prominent gardeners, yourself included, everyone says that they've killed a plant, they've killed a flower, and that's just part of the experience is trying. Right?
That's exactly right, and that's how you learn. It's not the ultimate goal of making a beautiful flower garden, although they always are beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a lot of times the process of getting there, and you learn. It's like a lot of roses, certain colors of roses, certain rose varieties are more susceptible to certain diseases like powdery mildew. And so those will be the first roses in your garden that'll get the powdery mildew. Then they'll pass it around to all the other ones, So a lot of times the best advice is to do some shovel pruning, get the disease magnet out of your garden, and put something else in that's more disease resistant. But
Good.
that's what's all about. What gardening is all about is learning, find out what works, find out what doesn't work. Don't ever ask me to grow a gardenia. I can't do it. I just can't. My wife keeps going, "You are the garden expert. What is wrong with your gardenias?"
Well, yeah, they won't bloom for me either.
Yeah.
What is up with that?
I don't know. It's a little bit harder of a plant to grow. We've got some new varieties that are coming out
Yeah.
that are going to be a lot easier,
Oh,
but
good.
they've got to be in the perfect situation.
It always drives me nuts when I go to some parking lot or drive along the freeway, and that's the particular shrub or bloom that I've been working so hard on. It's like, wait a minute.
Exactly.
What are they doing there? Like, they're not even, this tough love. They're not even giving it any food.
And somebody's got it in a pot. They never water it, and it just blooms like crazy.
It's just that perfect place.
You kill it with kindness, yeah.
Unbelievable. Well, we're talking with Lance Walheim, who is a great gardening author and expert and a spokesperson with Bayer Advanced. They had the great float, the Camelot float that has debuted, the Dick Clark Rose, which if you haven't seen, you ought to check it out, and it's going to be a fun thing. I'm looking forward to trying in the garden. Do you think it'd be a good try in a container? Does it matter?
Sure.
Yeah.
Most roses can be grown in containers. It just becomes a matter of that. You water them properly and fertilize, because any plant in a container is going to need to be watered more frequently. You got a lightweight soil that dries out. It's exposed all the way around on all sides of the pot, so you water more. The more you water, the more you leach the nutrients out. So you've got to fertilize more often. And if you're growing roses in pots, I'd fertilize at least every 2 weeks.
Do you?
Yeah, and so once you do that, then you're going to get that healthy bloom, because roses in general are heavy feeders. If you want to keep them blooming, you've got to fertilize them. And so even in a pot, you have more of a chance of them not getting enough and not blooming as much as you want them to. Now, in terms of what varieties of roses are ideal for pots, I think some of the shrubs, some of the miniatures are even going to give you, the very best show, because they put on the most bloom. But this would be perfect for a container.
Okay. Well, let's talk about rose care, because I think when people see the rose floats, you go, wow, you know what? Maybe I could have some of that closer to my own piece of the world, whether it's in a container or in a garden. And, I think that, first of all, roses get a bad rap. It has the perception that they're this prima donna and they need all this pampering, and really they don't, right?
No, they really don't. And the truth is that roses have probably never been easier to grow. We're getting these great new shrub roses that are just couldn't be simpler. And, we've got great products like Bayer Advanced products that are easy to use and are going to solve any problem you do run into. So, yeah, unfortunately, I think, and I ask myself all the time, why do people think that these are so hard to grow? And I think it has to do with the beauty of the flower.
The perfection of it.
Yeah, I mean, it just looks like it's got to be hard to grow. But they're not, if you do a little bit of homework and, plant varieties that are well adapted to your climate, and you can get information from local rose societies or, the local nurserymen are give you what's going to grow best. Because not all roses are great in all climates. What might grow close to the coast in Southern California might not be the same variety you want to grow inland. So doing a little homework really helps out.
And after we've had a series of rainy days, that always kind of throws me off, because you feel that it's going to be happy, that rose bush will be happy after getting a nice drenching. But then if it's too many days of drenching, it seems like then they are at risk of bad things.
Well, we out here in Southern California, I mean, we're blessed with the long, dry summers that really prevent a lot of the diseases that just plague people back east, things like black spot. And we're kind of coming to the end of the rose season. But, some roses, if we get an unusual rain when the flowers are in full bloom in, say, the fall, it can damage the flowers. Iceberg is one that, the flowers, which is one of my favorites.
Those white roses,
Yeah, when it gets wet, the flowers turn brown. So, bad things can happen. But this time of the year, it's more about the roses trying to go dormant. What can we do to encourage them to go dormant so that they can have a really good bloom in the spring?
And also, we're going to talk about pruning and get some good tips for you, because a lot of people also think that, oh my gosh, I can't cut a rose.
People have more anguish about
paranoia.
pruning, and they really shouldn't, because no matter what they do, it's probably going to be better than doing nothing, or they're certainly not going to do that much harm.
Did you get some new pruning shears for Christmas?
I have so many pruning shears. We do so many pruning demonstrations, and so then I end up bringing home the pruners. So I have a nice stack of pruners.
Oh, good.
If you're looking for some, you can come over to my house.
Good. All right. Well, when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more with Lance Walheim about some more great tips for growing roses, pruning roses, and some fun things you ought to be thinking about the new year in your garden. So keep it here. You're listening to Home Wizards. I'm Cindy Dole. We're broadcasting live from the Post Parade. What's the Post Parade? Well, you got to go to tournamentofroses.com. It's a great way to see all those floats that you saw either in person or on TV or heard us talk about on the radio. Now you can practically touch them. So you come on down and we'll see you. We're here till 5 o'clock. Cindy Dole, we're back after this.
Honeysuckle rose.